you. I really appreciate you doing this.
What?
Thank you. I really appreciate you doing this.
Oh, my
Can
pleasure.
you hear me okay?
Good to see you. What?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, real good.
Can you tell us about the tournament you have coming up and how did that come about?
Yeah, it's Mark Schultz Invitational. I don't know what venue we're going to use, but Eleazar DeLuca, Eleazar DeLuca, his nickname is Laser. He's a coach. He wrestled for Rutgers. He was pretty good too. He had a winning record, beat a lot of tough guys. He's kind of managing that part of my career, putting together things like that. So it's going to be May 7th and 8th, somewhere in New Jersey, probably. I don't know exactly where, but it's going to be an invitational, and they're going to limit it to, as elite of athletes as they can get. So I don't know exactly. He's done a couple tournaments before, but he wanted to do Mark Schultz Invitational, and we're going to have a mini camp the night or the day before the tournament for, I don't know, anybody that wants to come, I guess. But yeah, it'll be the mini camp will be May 6th, and then May 7th and 8th will be the tournament. And it'll be a freestyle tournament. I want to do a submission grappling tournament later on, but this one's going to be a freestyle tournament.
So they're just going to be limited to like top Americans, or you think you might have some like foreigners in there too?
Yeah, I think there might be some foreigners. Anybody can come. I think it's up to Laser who's going to be admitted. Yeah.
Can you tell us about martial combat? You were telling me about that the other day.
Oh, martial grappling. Yeah, that's the name of my style. Mark Schultz Grappling is the name of my business, but I call my style martial grappling just to differentiate it from, submission grappling or martial arts or something. Because my name sounds kind of like martial, so I thought, well, I should, it's kind of I don't know, it's a gimmick, but yeah. It's kind of accurate as far as what my style is. I mean, you took my style, what I do.
Wrestling base with BJJ, kind of like catch wrestling, mix of everything.
Right. Just takedowns of wrestling, submission holds of jiu-jitsu.
How's your health doing? I know you had some issues with your teeth.
Yes. Dana White paid for my teeth. I couldn't believe it. These are all implants here. And this is just a prosthetic. This is not the final version of the implants that I'm going to get. This has been a long process. They pulled all the teeth out of my head. And basically what happened was when I was wrestling, I would grit my teeth together really hard, and I created all kinds of micro fractures in my teeth. And in 2008, the dentist said, your teeth are disintegrating so rapidly. If you don't get a bunch of root canals and crowns, your teeth are going to fall out. So I went ahead with the procedure, got 8 root canals and 8 crowns. And then I had a heart attack in 2019, and I saw this documentary called Root Cause, and it showed a high positive correlation between root canals and heart attacks, because the plaque in the bacteria in your teeth, there's 3 miles of microtubules in each tooth. I know it's hard to believe, but there's all this bacteria that lives inside those microtubules. So it's impossible, because it's such a long tunnel network, it's impossible to sterilize an entire tooth. So there's always going to be bacteria that are living and breeding and growing and defecating and dying and eating each other. And then after they die those dead bacteria leak in through the gums, and into the first place they go is your coronary arteries, and it forms plaque. And that's what happened to me. I had a heart attack at the gym, and I drove to the hospital. I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And they gave me an EKG and said, yep, you're having one. 15 minutes later, I'm in the operating room getting a stent put in. And man, it was fast. They just got me in there and out like so quick. But yeah, had I waited and allowed the heart attack to continue without being treated, the cardiac muscle would have, a part of it could have died. But because I had got there so fast and did everything so fast, I had no damage at all to my heart.
Oh, thank God.
Pretty lucky.
How close do you follow MMA now these days, if at all?
Yeah, I follow it a little bit. You know, I don't. The problem I have is I get, well, you've been in the military, so you know what PTSD is, right?
Yep.
So I kind of get that when I watch these guys fight. It takes me back to my competition days. I start breathing really hard and my blood starts pumping really good. And I'm just like, it's difficult for me to watch, but once in a while, you know, if it's a really significant match and I feel like I shouldn't miss it, you know, I'll watch it. You know, I've seen most of the championship fights and most of the championship gold medal wrestling matches, but it's very difficult for me to watch anything other than that.
Yeah.
I mean, unless it's a really entertaining match, like a lot of good throws and stuff, then, you know, it's easy to watch. But anyway, that's just my particular problem. And most people don't have that problem. That's just mine.
Yeah, I got a little anxiety if I have a friend who's fighting, you know, then they get hurt or something. Yeah, definitely raises your heart. Can you tell us how you got into BJJ grappling?
Well, I had a match with Rickson Gracie in the BYU wrestling room. My very first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu experience was against Rickson Gracie. And he, at the time, was the best in the world, which was, you know, my first experience going against some guy. He's the best in the world. It was very difficult. But anyway, he tapped me out twice, and that convinced me that there were techniques that were better in a street fight than the techniques that I had learned in wrestling. I used to believe that everything I learned in wrestling was the best street fighting martial art. I thought wrestling was the best martial art. But then when I got tapped out by Rickson, I realized that there were other moves that I hadn't even considered learning. Because if you look at a wrestling rule book and you open it up to all the moves that are against the rules of wrestling, there's a lot of moves in there that are basically submission holds in jiu-jitsu, toe holds, you know, strangle holds, you know, arm locks, double wrist lock, which they renamed the Kimura 10 years after I broke the Turk's arm with the double wrist lock in the Olympics. And they're like, yeah, that's a Kimura. I'm like, no, it isn't. Yeah, it is. Anyway, that got me interested. And then I became, after Rickson tapped me out, I found out that he had a student. One of his black belts was living in Provo, Utah, of all places, Pedro Sauer. And I called Pedro up one day and asked him if I could be a student. And he said, yeah, sure. Come on down, my friend. And became great friends. And I trained with him for 3 years. And then he called me one day and told me that Dave Beneteau was going to fight in UFC 9 and asked me if I wanted to train with him. So I agreed to do that. And then I worked out with him for about 2 weeks. And then I slammed him, broke his hand, and he couldn't fight in the UFC. And so I took his place, and Dave and Pedro were in my corner during the UFC 9. And that was against Gary Big Daddy Goodridge, who's one of my best friends, by the way, right now. I don't know how that happened, but we're great friends.
I was just watching Chael Sonnen's podcast, and he told a story about training with you and when Tank Abbott came to the BYU room. I don't know if you want to talk about that real quick, but it's really nice. If you haven't heard it, just check it out.
Yeah. Chael, he's pretty accurate. A couple of things. I think he gets a couple of things wrong once in a while.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like him like 90% of the time. I agree with him, but sometimes you're like, yeah, but great guy though.
But yeah, I don't know what he said about Tank coming there, but that's true. Tank did come to BYU, train with me. I had a heavyweight named Mike Bolster, who was very instrumental in helping me prepare for the UFC. I mean, I wasn't planning on fighting. I was just, coaching wrestling. And Mike Bolster, when I started taking jiu-jitsu, Mike and I, we put on the cage fighting gloves, and we started training with each other, like no holds barred, just full contact. And man, I mean, it was intense. For like 3 months we were doing that. And then just coincidentally, Dave Beneteau and Pedro, they all called me up and they want me to train Dave. And then we did that. And then so Bolster was very instrumental in helping me prepare for the UFC, even though I wasn't planning on fighting. It just it was a coincidence. Anyway, Tank came to BYU with Paul Herrera. You remember Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah, he fought Gary Goodridge in UFC 8, got caught in a crucifix.
Yeah, those brutal elbows.
That was the most brutal knockout I've ever seen. Anyway, Tank, he came to BYU for about 2 months.
Oh, wow.
And he was incredibly strong, really powerful puncher. I mean, I spotted him weightlifting, and he benched 500 pounds 5 times in a row. Dude is just incredible. But he didn't have very good conditioning. That was his problem. And so he couldn't last, as long as, most wrestlers could. He was a wrestler, though, in junior college in California. And I think him and Mike either wrestled on the same team or wrestled in different colleges that were sort of close together. They became friends through junior college wrestling in California.
I remember you telling me about WCW wanted to sign you back in the day. I think you told me Paul Orndorff. I forgot the story.
WCW? No,
didn't you tell me that years ago? They were interested in you. You're doing some kind of Fight Club thing back in the day. This was like late 90s. No.
No.
Oh, I thought you told me that. Tell us about your.
I might have told you I wanted to do that.
No, I thought you said they called you up once and it just never came about, but they wanted you.
I wish. I mean, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Fake pro wrestling is a completely different thing, I mean, Kurt Angle makes a living as a fake pro wrestler, but he's the real deal. He's incredible. The guy is awesome. I mean, he's just maybe one of the greatest Olympic champions ever. But, he makes a living fake pro wrestling. And I thought, man, I should do that. It'd be easy, just, write a script, everything's, prearranged. It's all just, it's just, but yeah, I probably wouldn't be that good because I'm so open about the fact that it's scripted and it's fake, I probably wouldn't be very good acting like it's real,
Slamming guys too hard or. So tell us, you have a YouTube channel?
I do. It's Mark Schultz.
I don't know if you want to discuss this. You have a book?
Yeah, Foxcatcher. I don't like the name, but that's
Yeah.
the name that the publishers chose to take advantage of the publicity around the movie. Can you understand me okay?
Yeah. You sound good. You sound great.
Right.
I'll keep
I have
going.
a
What were you
little
saying?
lisp in my, because of these teeth, this prosthetic. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, tell us about the book again.
Well, the book it's a New York Times bestseller. It's also an Amazon editor's pick, and it's also the best-selling amateur wrestling book on Amazon, which isn't really saying much because amateur wrestling books don't sell that good, but it is the best-selling. It's got like over 400 interviews. It's sold like almost 50,000 copies, maybe more. Anyway, I didn't make a lot of money off of it or anything, but I'm trying to get word out there. You know, I want as many people to read the book as possible because, well, it's my autobiography.
Yeah.
If people want to know like how I did, what I did, everything, it pretty much explains how I did everything. You know, I mean, I became a student of the sport. I wrote all my techniques down. I trained like a madman, you know, just all kinds of stuff in there.
How can people get a hold of you if they want to do a seminar or clinics?
Well, they can get a hold of me on Twitter or Facebook, or my Facebook page is MS Grappling. My Twitter page is Mark Schultz. My Instagram is Mark P. Schultz. Yeah, they can get a hold of me any one of those ways. I do a lot more on Twitter probably than anything. I kind of I'm getting back on Facebook. I don't like Facebook and their, you know, the fact that they're using a surveillance app to, you know, watch. But since everybody's on there, it's the only way to, well, it's one of the ways to get out to to get word out to a lot of people.
Oh, back to Dana White. How did he get a hold of you?
Actually, he didn't get a hold of me. I was doing some podcasts. It's funny because we're doing a podcast now, but I was doing I've done like probably 6 podcasts in the last like 2 or 3 months. And every time I do a podcast, people ask me, you know, how did you get how did you write that book? You know, how did you get that made into a movie? And what I do is I tell them, look, I was miserable for about 8 years after I went out a loser in the '88 Olympics. And I threw my last match in the '88 Olympics. A lot of people think I was injured. That's not true. I threw that match. It just happened to be to a guy from Turkey. And a lot of people from Turkey are saying, oh, Mark, this guy got revenge on Mark for breaking the first Turk's arm. But I would have thrown the match to anybody. It didn't matter what country he was from. I just didn't feel it was moral to win for Team Foxcatcher, for DuPont's team. He threatened to ruin my career, and he basically ruined my motivation to compete. And I was about at the peak of my skill. You know, I was getting to the point where I didn't have to think about anything. I could just, my body had its own mind. And I was beating guys. I mean, my last match in America, I beat Mike Sheets 13-1. You know, Mike Sheets is the only American in 5 years to beat me. And he's a 2-time NCAA champion. He won the NCAAs by a combined total of 68-3, and was named the outstanding wrestler. And they made a rule the next year of limiting matches to 15 points. If you got 15 points ahead, you got a technical fall. I call that the Mike Sheets rule because he humiliated his opponent so bad that year. Anyway, Mike's really, really tough, and he probably would have won the '88 Olympics if he'd have gone instead of me. But I threw that last match, and I didn't realize just how negatively it would affect me mentally, because you want to go out a winner. It's important to go out a winner. And, you know, Wayne Bachman's got a book called Wrestling On and Off the Mat. He's got a whole chapter in there about going out, the importance of going out a winner. And I didn't in the '88 Olympics. And for about 8 years, I was miserable. But then in 1991, I had that match with Hickson. I realized, and I didn't get into wrestling to win tournaments. I got into it to learn how to fight. I thought it was the best martial art. Then I had that match with Hickson, and I switched over. I quit wrestling. I was very grateful I found jiu-jitsu, and I went into Pedro's club, and then I trained Dave Beneteau, and then I took his place in the UFC, and I won the UFC. And I had so much energy after winning the UFC that I went home and I thought, nobody knows what I did with my life. I'm going to write everything down and give it to my kids, at least my kids. So I went home, I wrote everything down, I sent it around to some friends. One of them said, hey, well, this would make a great movie. And it went about going to get it turned into a movie. And then it became a book. And then but it was all because of the energy that I got from going out a winner in the UFC, which was even more important to me. Going out a winner in the UFC was, actually winning wasn't really the thing. It's just having the guts to step into the octagon was the victory for me. Winning was frosting on the cake, but going out like that and ending my career like that gave me so much energy that I went home and it gave me back my happiness, basically. And I could talk about my career, myself, and without, feeling self-conscious anymore. And it just basically changed my whole life. And so every time I give podcasts, I talk about this aspect and there's this situation and one of the producers, the executive producer of the UFC, his name's Ben Schultz. He called me and he said, hey, we were going to do an episode of Fight Lore.
I was just about to ask you about that, but keep going.
Yeah, so he goes, hey, can we do an episode on you? He goes, I saw your podcast, or I heard your podcast, and we wanted to get you on camera talking about how the UFC affected your life or whatever. And then we want to do this episode of Fight Lore on you. Or maybe it's on UFC 9. I don't know. They talked to some other people, Dave Beneteau, Pedro, Chael, those guys. And, some of the other people involved. And so I go, yeah, sure. I'll let you do an episode on me. And because I was in the middle of getting my teeth replaced, I said, hey, can you ask Dana White if he needs like a color commentator or announcer or something, maybe I could do that, make some money and pay for my teeth, right? Well, then Ben calls me back and he goes, hey, Mark, Dana is going to pay for your teeth. I was like,
awesome.
No freaking way. You know how much these teeth cost? $53,000.
Oh, damn.
And he paid the whole thing. It's unbelievable. So I'm like, God bless you, Dana White. If you're listening to this, Dana, God bless you.
Yeah, I've got a good Dana story. I went to UFC in Detroit one day, and we were talking to like the waiters and waitresses, and they served Dana White. But Dana White, once it was done, he gave them 2 front row tickets. They were saying how nice of a guy he was. So he gets a bad rap sometimes, but he does good things.
I like listening to Dana talk, in those press conferences. I think he's the funniest guy. This is before, he paid for my teeth or anything. I just always like listening to him because he doesn't give a shit.
Exactly. He's not politically correct, which is good.
Whatever he thinks comes out of, he doesn't need to kiss anybody's butt. He's a self-made billionaire.
So when is that Fight Lore episode coming out? Have they filmed it yet, or are they still going to film it? Because I really like that show.
We filmed it already, but it's coming out, I think, in January.
Have you checked out any of the other Fight Lore episodes? They're pretty good.
Yeah, I saw the Diaz brothers one. That was pretty funny.
Oh, yeah, that was funny in the hospital. They did one on the one bank robber. I forgot his name on top of my head, but there's some good ones.
Well, yeah, this is a new genre for me. I don't know anything. I haven't really seen much of it. I just did it because, something to do.
Yeah. So would you like to give a shout out to anybody before we end this?
Shout out. Oh, I guess my kids.
Or anything you want to talk about that we haven't mentioned already?
Well, let's see. No, I guess not. What? Well, no, I guess not.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this, Mark, and keep in touch, and I'll send you the info.
Okay, Carlos. Thanks,
All right.
buddy.
Peace. God bless.